as the title indicates, the book is titled Language, Memory, and Identity in the Middle East, The Case for Lebanon. And it is essentially, it deals with the construction of national identity in the modern Middle East and the use of language and historical memory, and perhaps even the construction of language and historical memory for the purpose of constructing national identities. The reason why I began thinking about writing something like this began when I was doing my graduate work at Brandeis University, and I was the theme that I was interested in at the time was minority peoples in the Levant area, minorities in the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean. More importantly, minority narratives and minority history. But that coincided with 9/11, the beginning of the rush towards Arabic, towards wanting to acquire Arabic, and as part of my graduate work, I was asked if I'd be able or willing to teach Arabic, and that's how I got into teaching Arabic, even though I was being formed to be a historian, a cultural historian. I dealt essentially with intellectual history and history of ideas in the modern Middle East, and I got into teaching Arabic at Brandeis University, teaching what we call modern standard Arabic, which is not a spoken language. I'd like to say it's a vocalized language. It's a language that people speak out of prepared text. It is not a language that is spoken spontaneously. It is a learned language. It's a language that people acquire at school. And so, for that reason, it is a language that is reserved to a minority of people in the Middle East, namely the elites and educated peoples and literati and writers and so forth. But that's the language that we teach in the academy. And that's the language that when people come to us and say we want to study Arabic, that's the language that they talk about. In the course of teaching Arabic, I began encountering students, a group of students we refer to as heritage students, and that is students who supposedly spoke Arabic but wanted to learn how to read and write their native language. And it was during those encounters that I came to the realization, those were students who were from Syrian descent, Egyptian descent, Iraqi descent, American-born, who in our discussions, when we were trying to formulate classes for them, would tell us something like, I grew up speaking Arabic, but I don't understand what goes on Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera was the most watched Arabic language TV network, satellite TV network at the time. And this is when I began asking questions. I mean, this is an interesting question. I grew up speaking Arabic, and yet I do not know, I cannot understand what goes on Al Jazeera, not because I can't read Arabic, but because I can't understand the Arabic that's being broadcast on Al Jazeera. And that sort of began a switch, a slight switch in directions in my research, and I began working on the idea of linguistic nationalism. And from that doctoral work came later on the book that's before you now, Language, Memory, and Identity. That work also caused me to begin asking questions personally. I am originally Lebanese. I came to the States at the age of 17. I grew up in a polyglot household. We spoke multiple languages. My grandfather was Cuban-born. He tells stories. I remember my grandfather playing the piano and singing to us in Spanish. But I remember stories he used to tell us about living in Cuba until the age of 20. This is when he went to Lebanon and decided to stay. They used to refer to them in Cuba as Turcos, Turks, not Arabs, but Turcos. And that was on account of the fact that the early waves of Lebanese immigrants who came to the New World, to the Americas, to North America, but also to South America and the Caribbean, were speakers of Turkish. They spoke Turkish. They were subjects of the Ottoman Empire, and their spoken language was Turkish. And that's why they sort of earned that sobriquet, Turcos. In North America, they refer to them to this day. I mean, today the dominant label has become Arab. They refer to them as Arab Americans. But the early immigrants of the 1860s, this is when the first wave of Lebanese immigrants started coming to the States, were being referred to as Syrians, and that is because they themselves referred to themselves as Syrians, and that wasn't because they were natives of what we refer to today as the Syrian Arab Republic, but that was mainly because the Christians of what is today Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Israel referred to themselves as Syrians. They recognized themselves as Syrians, and that was the name of the main churches to which they belonged. Syrian in the sense that the liturgy of the church was Syriac, which is a dialect of Aramaic. And that label stuck until the sort of instigation of the Arab national movement in the 1930s and 40s, and that caused a switch in the labels that these people used to refer to themselves. And this is how the Arab label became more in vogue in our days. And my book attempts to look at the history of the term Arab, what we mean by the word Arab when we refer to someone as an Arab, and it deals with the issue of language and how there is a certain symbiosis between the ethnicity, the Arab ethnicity, or the Arab cultural identity, if you will, and the Arabic language that is used as this nimbus, as this focal point of this Arab identity. About the history of opposition to the Arab national movement, or the idea that one's identity is an Arab identity. This issue has a long history in the Middle East, and actually before the instigation of the Arab national movement in the 1920s and 1930s Middle East, there was a movement in the 1860s, 1860s, 70s, up until the late 19th century, when different subjects of the Ottoman Empire, of course the countries that we refer to today as the Arab world, the countries of the Arab world, were up until 1918 mere provinces in the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, by its very definition, was generally a polyglot, multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, generally very tolerant of this diversity. And so although everybody was a subject of the Ottoman Empire recognized the diversity of the different peoples that lived in the Ottoman dominions. Towards the end of the 19th century, there began an impulse within the Ottoman government, the Ottoman elite, towards Turkification of the different subjects of the Ottoman Empire. That is, the idea of advancing Turkish as a nationality or an ethnicity, and certainly advancing the Turkish language as a national language. Now, Turkish had been for 400 years the administrative language of the Ottoman Empire, and that's why I said that my own grandparents were speakers of Turkish, among other languages. and among other languages because of the fact that the Ottoman Empire was a multi-ethnic and multilingual empire. As a reaction by some people, some groups, some intellectuals within the Ottoman Empire, a reaction against the Turkification of the various communities that had lived in the empire, there began a movement of Arabization. So there was a group of elites, mainly in Beirut, but also in Alexandria, in Egypt, and in Cairo. Groups of, they're referred to in the literature as Syro-Lebanese immigrant groups in Egypt, that began a movement of Arabic linguistic revival. It's referred to in Arabic as the Nahda, which means the Renaissance, the Arabic Renaissance movement. Those were people who did not want to be looked at as Turks. They wanted to latch onto a different kind of identity that sort of separated them. They were content with the idea of being Ottoman subjects, but now that the Ottomanism was turning into a Turkish identity, they wanted nothing to do with the Turkish identity, and they began elaborating different kinds of identities. Among those identities that were being toyed with was the pharaonic identity in Egypt, that is the idea that says that the Egyptians proceed from a long, ancient line of peoples, beginning with the ancient pharaohs. A similar movement began being played around with in the area of what is today Syria and Lebanon, and that is Syrianism, the idea of the people of the region being Syrians, not Turks, no longer Ottomans. And in Lebanon, people started toying with the idea of Phoenicianism, that the peoples of Lebanon were descendants of the ancient Canaanite Phoenicians. Now, most of these intellectuals who were versifying on these ideas were writing about those ideas not in Turkish, but for the first time in their history as members or subjects of the Ottoman Empire, began writing in Arabic. And this caused a revival of the Arabic language, modernization of the Arabic language, a language that had lain dormant for 400 years, was all of a sudden being used to publish newspapers, books, journals of opinion. It was still very primitive because it was a language that had not been used for 400 years. But they were injecting it with new terminologies, new concepts, new words, new lexicons. And this is how the language that we refer to today as modern standard Arabic took flight, was born. I refer to it throughout my book as MSA, and that's a short for modern standard Arabic.